Gamefreak, the powerhouse behind Pokemon. Everyone who is even somewhat familiar with Pokemon knows who Gamefreak is. But did you know that there was a time in Nintendo's recent history when Gamefreak wasn't as well known? Gamefreak started out as a magazine that focused on video games and strategy guides. So now you're probably thinking, okay, then what is SmartBall and what does Gamefreak have to do with it? Well, let's find out. Over the lifespan of the Super Nintendo, there were a staggering 721 games released in North America. How could anyone remember them all? Well, I'm going to try to fix that. This is Forgotten Games, a series where I showcase the games that slipped under your radar and should be given a second look. Before Gamefreak became the big game juggernaut we know today, it kicked off as a DIY video game magazine in the 80s, dreamt up by Satoshi Tajiri and Ken Sugimori. Tajiri got the ball rolling, dropping the inaugural issue in 1983, using the term Gamefreak as his pen name when freelancing for publications like Family Computer Magazine and Famicom Tsushin. Sugimori, drawn in by its charm, later joined as an illustrator after stumbling upon the magazine in a shop. Gamefreak's first issue consisted of pages discussing video games, featuring various arcade games including Galaga. Pages 4 through 5 present a table of game titles categorized by genre, along with corresponding keys. Page 6 contained a section called Amusement News, highlighting the top games with Xevious and pole position leading the best 5. Pages 7 and 8 titled The Game Bug, featuring titles like Donkey Kong and Dig Dug. Fast forward to April 26, 1989, when Tajiri, Sugimori, and Junichi Masuda decided to go into game development, and so the video game company was born. One of Gamefreak's early hits was a game called Quinty, an action puzzle game for the Nintendo Entertainment System. In North America, it went by the name Mendel Palace, a puzzle game in which the player must save his girlfriend Candy, who is kidnapped by her young sister, who is jealous of all the attention Candy receives and traps her inside a dream. Quinty, or Mendel Palace, had moderate success here in the States, selling around 60,000 copies. It was praised with its simple, easy-to-learn gameplay and beautifully animated graphics. The publishing process and commercial success of Mendel Palace honed Tajiri's inspiration and skills to create Pokemon on the Game Boy, which grew to include what critics called one of the greatest games of all time. Riding the success of Quinty, Gamefreak decided to try their hands at a platforming game. Their first attempt was Jerry Boy, or SmartBall here in the US, a game that more often than not flies under the radar. While everyone else was going all out with flashy graphics on the new Super Famicom, Gamefreak kept it old school, sticking to a design that had already proven itself in loads of NES games. So what's the deal with SmartBall? Being one of the early titles for the Super Nintendo, it closely resembles the platforming style of the NES era. Jerry, the blue slime ball protagonist, navigates from left to right using the familiar 2-button controls for attacking, running, and jumping, a technique perfected in the earlier days by Super Mario Bros. Jerry Boy, or SmartBall, released in Japan in September 1991 and hit the US later that year. While not breaking the mold, it took the straightforward and enjoyable vibes of the NES games and brought them into the 16-bit Super Nintendo era. While other games were getting all complex and stylish, SmartBall played it safe. Sony, being the mastermind behind the DSP, or Digital Signal Processor, sound chip, had a widespread role in the various games, such as Pilot Wings and Super Mario Kart, providing computational support especially for games featuring 3D elements. While these chips share a familiar interface, they vary in their command functions. The Super Nintendo CPU would write computational commands to the DSP's memory mapper registers, then read back the computed result. The DSP is an acronym for Digital Signal Processor, but the name seems poorly chosen. It does not operate on a continuous signal like most DSPs. So the folks at Gamefreak started brainstorming ideas. They started with this goofy concept of making an RPG where the main character is a low-level slime, a basic enemy you encountered all the time.
Although the work itself was simultaneous, the basis of the way of thinking was in the direction of an action game. It would be wrong to think that we just said, this is the story of a slime as hero, so let's make an action game. We made an action game first, and then the story was incorporated into it. The slime would go through great trouble, flying and bouncing for example. The hero goes inside the body of a whale. It makes one big tale. Satoshi Tajiri, 1993, Tokuma Shoten Intermedia.
But as time went on, they decided to ditch the RPG theme and amp up the action, using the slime's powers for some cool platforming moves. Their goal? Make a game that's the complete opposite of Mental Palace and hopefully make a bigger splash in the market. They initially called it Jelly Bean, and even showcased a prototype with more realistic graphical styles at trade shows and in gaming magazines, before settling on an all-round cartoony vibe. Although they had big plans for funny and comical enemies, they had to cut most of them due to memory issues. So instead, you're left with just the occasional quirky character like the wide-eyed running man. When the game hit the US as SmartBall, it went through several changes, but we'll go into those more later. But one of the more glaring changes was the cover. Sugimori's cute anime design got the boot in favor for some extreme 90s vibes, including flaming meteors, a funky take on the giant bird boss, Sony ImageSoft's logo hogging a massive chunk of the corner, and changing the title to SmartBall to avoid confusion with another game called Jelly Boy. Sadly though, all these changes didn't help the game stand out in the sea of Super Nintendo titles, and it ended up drifting into the forgotten waters of gaming history. Like most games that get an international release, some content doesn't make it into every version, but with SmartBall, it's a major difference. In the North American version, part of the main story is completely removed. In the North American version, you just start the game, without knowing where you're from, why you're a ball of goo, and what you're fighting for. While in the Japanese version, there's a whole intro cutscene to explain what's going on. But upon further investigation and research for this video, it looks as though the North American version did have a story. It's hidden in the manual. That may not seem like a big deal if you bought the game or you rented it and the store provided the manual. But when I rented this game as a kid, all I got was the game, so I had no idea what was going on. Personally, I don't think that was a good decision on Sony ImageSoft's part. In September 1991, Epic Sony Records launched Jerry Boy for the Super Famicom, and 6 months later, the American version emerged under Sony Publishing's firm Sony ImageSoft, rebranded as SmartBall. The change in title, possibly influenced by the Japanese language tendencies to interchange L's and R's, sparked speculation about whether Jerry Boy was originally intended as Jelly Boy. The international selection of the name Jerry, reflecting on the main character, adds a layer of complexity. Despite the potential for confusion, the name change, designed to prevent ridicule in the American market, appears pragmatic had the game been released as Jelly Boy. During the conversion of Jerry Boy for American audiences, notable changes, particularly in controls, were introduced. The original Japanese version assigned running, wall ceiling sticking, and launching your projectile to the same button, the Y button. In SmartBall, the controls were streamlined, allowing only running and sticking to the Y button, while throwing your projectile was reassigned to the shoulder buttons. This adjustment, addressing previous control awkwardness, was a welcome change, sparking a desire for Jerry Boy to have initially featured such controls. However, less favorable were the questionable omissions in SmartBall. A couple being the removal of the story and towns. Sony ImageSoft mandated the removal of towns and dialogue for the American release, a decision seemingly unjustified as there was nothing controversial or objectionable about them. The towns, integral to Jerry Boy's essence, provided solace and sanctuary, making their absence in SmartBall a perceived removal of the game's heart. Despite their charm and cuteness, each version experienced the removal of two sweet-sounding songs. The town theme and the theme for Heaven. These losses, combined with the removal of towns, erase the vibrant interactions with humans of various age and professions, including teenagers, professors, men in suits, angels, and Eskimos. The absence of these elements, along with the ability to talk to animals, diminished the overall experience. Sony's attempt to alter the game highlighted inconsistency in localization, evident in removing the crucifix in Stage 8-A. While on the other hand leaving signs leading to excised areas untouched. Despite the removal of towns and dialogue, both versions retained an alternate exit to Stage 3-A featuring a little boy. However, in SmartBall, pressing Y in front of him resulting in lip movement but with no words, contrasting Jerry Boy where he spoke kanji like any regular human. The retention of certain scenes, including the ending without kanji, demonstrated an attempt to preserve elements from the Japanese original in both versions. The wedding crash scene in SmartBall, lacking dialogue, introduced awkward silence that might confuse players unfamiliar with the storyline. In spite of attempts to preserve some elements, the inconsistencies in localization choices left a sense of loss, especially for those who valued the original game's charm, diversity, and engaging interactions. Somewhere there's a mystical land called Kyleria, where the people have been living in peace and harmony for as long as anyone can remember. The king, Jeffrey, is very wise and just, and he is now preparing to retire and pass the crown to his eldest son, Jerry. Jerry has just married his wife, Wendy, and is ready to assume the responsibilities of leadership. But Jeffrey's other son, Tom, is jealous of Jerry, and he has enlisted the help of the Bad Wizard. The Bad Wizard? Wait a minute. Yep, that's what it says, the Bad Wizard, and together they have brought down a great curse upon Jerry. They have stolen Wendy away and stripped Jerry of his humanity, reducing him to a small ball. Now he must slither his way to the Bad Wizard's castle to return to his normal self and rescue Princess Wendy. From here on out, I'm going to refer to the main character as Jerry. Even though you're a ball of goo, SmartBall delivers a platformer experience that meets expectations and stands out with unique twists, offering a familiar feel for players well-versed in the genre. The game introduces distinctive moves that capitalize on Jerry's jelly-like physiology. In addition to his mysterious ability to throw rubber and iron balls at enemies without arms, Jerry can flatten or stretch himself to engage foes, a skill crucial in navigating boss fights. Furthermore, Jerry can also move along walls and ceilings, intricately designed platforming, or cleverly hidden secret areas. While SmartBall's unique elements distinguish it from other platformers, they also present challenges, as mastering the timing and precision required for these actions can be difficult. Players may find themselves completing the game before fully mastering SmartBall's controls. It's important to note a couple of quirks, such as the inability to collect life points while holding power-ups, and Jerry's limited capacity to only hold 9 projectiles, with the count resetting to 0 upon picking up an additional one. Despite these issues, SmartBall isn't overly challenging, and the inclusion of hidden letters spelling out Jerry across 16 levels adds replay value, reminiscent of the Kong letters in Donkey Kong Country. Equipped with 2 different types of attacks, the long-range one and the short-range maneuvers, the emphasis tends to be on the long-range attacks, where Jerry launches balls at his enemies. However, precision aiming is one of utmost importance in this scenario. Additionally, your ability to unleash attacks is constrained by the current number of balls in your possession. You have the option to fall back on your short-range attacks too. Simply compress Jerry or elongate him, and you'll know it's effective when the enemies are either incapacitated or momentarily stunned. It's a useful tactic, but I wouldn't advise relying on it excessively. The long-range ball-spitting attacks provide a safe distance from your adversaries, or a boss, whereas short-range attacks can leave you vulnerable if you get too close. Exercise prudent judgment regarding proximity, and you should navigate through unscathed. Be mindful that stretching Jerry's body too frequently might still result in heart being deducted, so keep that in consideration. The primary source for your ball weapons is the tulips, and with a bit of patience they will close up again, ready to be utilized once more. Occasionally, you may stumble upon different power-ups that prove to be helpful in specific situations. If you find an iron ball, moving slowly becomes a trade-off for the ability to potentially defeat one or more enemies at once when launched at them, and these can be used at any time. On rare occasions, you might discover a seed. By pressing the action button, you can sprout it, allowing it to grow as high as you desire. There's also a jump power-up that enables you to jump higher than usual as long as it remains inside Jerry. Something interesting about that is if you spit upward and it lands on Jerry, the power-up can still be used. However, if a power-up, excluding the iron ball, is expelled toward a wall or ceiling, it will pop and be lost forever. To continue using it, you need to find a way to keep it. Some tulips may contain health extensions, up to 2 times per stage, or even extra lives. Jerry Boy's controls are straightforward, and although it may take some time to get used to due to its structure, you'll find yourself adapting after a few areas. Jerry, being a jelly-like blob, has advantages. He can stick to and move on walls and even the ceiling, allowing access to higher areas or avoiding enemies on the ground. Occasionally, you'll encounter small tubes that Jerry can stretch and squeeze himself inside to reach the other end. Pressing B makes Jerry jump, and the height of the jump depends not just how hard you press the button, but on how fast you're moving when jumping. Holding down the Y button is necessary for sticking to walls and ceilings, which is also used to make Jerry slip by quickly. The Y button is also employed for utilizing power-ups, and is also used for utilizing power-ups. Given the lighthearted tone of the game, the visuals are vibrant and cheerful. While they may not be rich in detail or feature parallax scrolling extensively, considering the overall theme, It complements the game effectively. However, it's essential to note that there are noteworthy moments in this department. The game begins in an area adorned with a green leafy landscape, featuring a straightforward yet impactful shot of a mountain in the background. As you progress into the desert area, the day starts brightly, gradually transitioning into darker tones until nightfall, all the while the moon maintaining its position. Despite the simplicity of the desert landscape's art choice, the transition is basic yet effective. In water areas, the blue dithering effects replace the conventional color layering approach. While the enemies remain behind this layer, Jerry stands out in front. Although given his blue color, he might have blended into or disappeared into the effect. A standout area worth special mention is the moon stages, solely operated using Mode 7. As Jerry moves left or right, a surreal feeling is created, with the planet he traverses slowly rotating. Credit is also due for the depiction of the Cygnus constellation in the distance, featuring depth-enhancing shading. These moon stages represent the game's visual highlights, and it would have been appealing to see more areas like these. Despite the lava effects resembling flashing checker marks, they worked effectively. The waterfall and snow effects in their respective locations are pleasing to the eye. Other areas maintain a decent aesthetic, featuring a light anime look and feel. This association works to the game's advantage, as their motions and expressions exclude a delightful charm. Jerry, portrayed as the slimy blob with a cute wide-eyed design, particularly stands out. Each enemy possesses its own distinctive charm, especially when they exhibit incredulous expressions upon being defeated. Their animations vary from basic to quite solid, and the enemy roster is diverse, featuring upright mice, sentient flames, big birds, firebirds, seemingly harmless rocks, zero-gravity bunnies, fish, crabs, penguins, and even humanized toy soldiers. The boss fights showcase characters more than twice Jerry's size with some ingenious ideas. A standout includes a giant bird capable of destroying houses, and another boss takes the form of a series of dust clouds with a head and a pair of hands and feet. Notable boss encounters involve a flabby penguin, a centaur constellation, a large salmon starting with scales covering its body until reduced to bones, and the final boss, which, while okay, concludes the game's visual ensemble. The music, composed by Akira Yamaoka, Yasuo Fukuda, and the late Manabu Saito, stand out as some of the best parts of the game. The lighthearted and charming soundtrack fits the innocent and adorable tones of the game perfectly. The title theme, Jerry's main theme, and various area-specific tracks contribute to the overall sense of mystery, wonder, and charm. Some standout themes, including the soft and melodic Ruins theme, and the immersive water theme. But the moon theme is an absolute favorite for its simplicity and wonder. While the boss themes are okay, some sound over the top, particularly the Life Lost, game over, and victory themes. Overall, the music complements the stages well. Sound effects, though not as abundant as the music, work decently with pops or explosive bangs for enemy contact, a shy squeak for Jerry's damage, and a beanstalk-like sound for growing seeds. Some bosses also have a unique sound effect when landing hits. If the target audience for this bouncing character, action and straightforward gameplay is younger kids, they might not fully grasp the game's underlying challenge. The game introduces a respawn mechanism for its enemies, occasionally placing them in tricky situations. Players may encounter enemies on slopes, making it challenging to engage them directly, leading to a strategic decision like using a weapon or attempting a risky jump. Jumping with Jerry's square jump arc resembles a squash parabola. Resulting in sailing too far or falling short of platforms. This imprecise jumping mechanic, coupled with demanding platform precision, feels somewhat out of place in the otherwise relaxed gameplay. Despite these issues, they don't overshadow the overall action, and players tend to accept them over the course of the 16 levels, minimizing the impact of these problems. SmartBall, or Jerry Boy as it's known in Japan, seems to have been a bit more popular overseas. I vaguely remember finding this game at a rental store, and it was the cover of the game that made me want to try it out. But in Japan, to promote the game, there was a Jerry Boy comic, published in serial from Family Computer magazine from 1991 to 1992, and was eventually combined into a single book, with a teaser for a proposed sequel, Jerry Girl. Although Jerry Girl never came to fruition, there actually was a sequel to Jerry Boy. Despite its occasional and awkward controls, this success prompted Epic Sony Records to consider another game with a similar jelly concept. Slated for release 3 years later in 1994 exclusively for the Super Famicom. Unfortunately, the timing couldn't have been worse. By the time Jerry Boy was completed and ready for release, strains between Nintendo and Sony were at their peak, particularly due to the infamous Philips CDI incident. Speaking of, stay tuned to the channel. I have a video coming out that deals with the Nintendo PlayStation controversy. Consequently, the game was indefinitely cancelled when Sony shifted its focus to creating the PlayStation, severing all ties with Nintendo. Although Sony didn't have to be the publisher, their association with the first game left no alternative, creating a lose-lose situation. Jerry Boy 2 was believed to be lost forever until a ROM surfaced online a decade ago, making it playable. The general consensus among those who have played the Jerry Boy 2 ROM is that it surpasses Jerry Boy in many aspects. It addresses numerous flaws present in the original 1991 title. This time, players could choose from 6 characters turned into jelly blobs, including a dog, each with unique skills. The visuals were more detailed and charmingly colorful. The controls were fine-tuned and polished. An option screen was available from the start. Multiple routes could be explored, and secrets affected the ending. If you're willing to do some sleuthing, you can find the ROM with a fan-translated version by King Mike and Chris Covell. If Jerry Boy 2 had been released earlier than 1994, it likely would have been a success, because the game offered an excellent gaming experience. But sadly, that wasn't the case. While it could have been a more enjoyable game with user-friendly control setup, SmartBall loses points for denying American gamers the opportunity to experience the in-game story in towns. This omission results in a game that lacks the heart and drive present in the Japanese version. Sony ImageSoft did eventually include stories in their Nintendo 16-bit games, even in weaker titles after 1994. However, the removal of the story from SmartBall reflects poorly on them in my opinion, causing people to play the inferior version unaware until the internet era that they were missing out on something fun. This doesn't make SmartBall inherently bad, but it does relegate it to a lower tier. While many people have a fondness for the 1991 System Sack-On platformer, it can be enjoyable at times, but the significant lack of replay value is a substantial drawback. However, if replay value isn't a priority for you, especially on a cloudy or rainy afternoon, the game is worth popping in. Despite its drawbacks, SmartBall has numerous delightful aspects. Its charming art design, catchy soundtrack, and engaging presentation collectively position it as a game that could easily stand alongside the most popular classics in the genre. Despite possessing all the hallmarks of a true classic, SmartBall unfortunately slipped through the cracks of popularity. The game is brimming with pleasant surprises and intricate details that are typically introduced in the first few stages of other titles, but in SmartBall, they continue to emerge and delight at every turn. Lives are generously provided, surpassing the rate at which you can lose them. However, I personally don't mind this, as the game compensates for this ease by offering a plethora of stages to navigate. The controls may feel a bit sticky at times, but it's not a significant issue. SmartBall is a genuinely enjoyable, gentle game that regrettably has been widely overlooked. SmartBall is in essence just there. It has an appealing and generally accessible nature that allows young kids to pick it up and enjoy it. The absence of any story or character names hinders the potential investment of American kids. Currently, the game stands as an anonymous, middle-of-the-road cartoon with decent visuals and a concept that doesn't stand out. For those who grew up with SmartBall, I strongly recommend playing the Japanese Jerry Boy to discover what you missed out on. While it may not stand out among the better Generation 1 Nintendo 16-bit games or other platformers, giving it a chance reveals that it can be fun to play on occasion. Thank you so much for watching. I'm wanting to start doing more content like this and have a lot planned. If you liked this video, please give it a like. If you didn't, that other button seems to work pretty well too. If you would like to support the channel in a more personal way, consider sharing my videos to someone you think would enjoy them. And if you do enjoy this type of content, consider becoming a member or leaving a super thanks. Any support is greatly appreciated. Again, thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video.